everyone, now that my monster fight is all done, it's time for some three-headed kaiju dragon fun. So one could say King Ghidorah is now on the way. To start off this monster-sized project today, we'll first need some aluminum armature wire, one could say. And we'll be using a lot of it today, because this dragon definitely will need all the support he can get, I do say. Because this is the biggest project I have ever worked on, well, to this day. And one could say there will be more about that later on during this video today. So the other building materials used on this project today will be tinfoil, you could say, to help us save on oven-baked clay and to keep the weight down, I do say, because this dragon would weigh a ton otherwise, you could say. We'll also be using a little bit of plasticine clay today to help this dragon, well, stand upright, you could say, otherwise he'd be falling on his three faces all day. Now, before I get too carried away with the poetry today, there's a few things I would like to say. In my 25 plus years experience of working with plasticine clay and, well, building armature dolls, this has probably been the most challenging project I have ever done. To the point where, honestly, almost wasn't very much fun. There was one point I literally woke up in the middle of the night thinking about a three-headed dragon and being lost thinking I was still in my studio. So, I think it's safe to say the three-headed dragon got to my head a little bit, you could say. And normally I try to post once a week, and unfortunately, given the difficult nature of this project, that was just not physically possible whatsoever. And well, if you've kept up to date on the shorts, I appreciate that, and well, you certainly know it's not from a lack of trying. Now, unfortunately, given the unforgiving nature of the algorithm towards this channel, it's probably not going to work out in the end, unfortunately, taking this long with it. So that's where I'm going to be relying a little bit more on you guys than usual to be sure to hit that like button to let me know that you appreciate all the hard work and effort that goes into these projects. Anyway, that's enough of my ranting, so let's learn about King Ghidorah, where today I will be going over the origin and history of Godzilla's arch-rival, the horrifying space dragon known as King Ghidorah. The character has appeared in virtually every major Godzilla franchise, and is widely considered to be the greatest and most iconic nemesis. But how did he first come to be, and what forms has he taken in the nearly 60 years since his release? Well, let's find out. King Ghidorah was first introduced in 1964 in the film Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster. The producer of the Godzilla film series, Tomoyuki Tanaka, he loved the idea of having a multiple-headed monster as the new rival for Godzilla, and drew inspiration from Yamata no Orochi, a 8-headed dragon from Japanese folklore. There may have also been some inspiration from Means Goodingmich, a 3-headed dragon that appeared in a Soviet fantasy film called Ilya Murimitz. The mythological inspiration can also be seen in his name, with Ghidorah deriving from the word Hydra, a multiple-headed monster from Greek mythology. In contrast to previous monsters Godzilla has squared off against, this new creation would also be extraterrestrial in origin, bringing a new dimension to Godzilla's rogue gallery. With 3 snake-like heads, massive wings, and bright golden scales, King Ghidorah definitely made an impression upon his first debut in 1964, Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster. Although it should be mentioned that the original English release in 1965 was, well, mispronounced as Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster, with essentially no O. However, subsequent re-releases fixed the issue. Anyway, with his abilities to fly through space, fire gravity beams out of all 3 mouths, and his possession of incredible strength and resilience, it's no wonder that King Ghidorah's appearance on Earth is what prompted Godzilla to team up with former rivals Rodan and Mothra. Ghidorah's appearance marked a major change within the Godzilla franchise, with the role of the titular monster shifting to that of a defender of Earth and humankind in the face of this new threat. In his initial appearances, Ghidorah was depicted as a space kaiju, an ancient entity responsible for the destruction of many alien civilizations, including one that inhabited the planet Venus. Sensing his imminent arrival, Mothra is sent out to unite the Earth's kaiju to attempt to repel this terrifying invader. Mothra's efforts paid off, and Ghidorah was defeated by the trio. After his first appearance, Ghidorah returned in the following film, Invasion of Astro Monster, as the pawn of numerous alien races, including the Exalians, who refer to him as Monster Zero. No doubt his most spectacular appearance in the classic film series was in 1968 Destroy All Monsters, which concluded a massive battle royale between Ghidorah and basically every other monster that Toho had. The Showa era of Godzilla films ended in 1973, seemingly marking King Ghidorah's final appearance on screen in 1972, Godzilla vs. Gigan. But the franchise was revived in the Heisei era in 1984, leading to Ghidorah's return in 1991 in the film Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah. We interrupt this programming for a puppy break. Can I help you? Oh, okay, it's doggy break. Alright. Jesus. During this era, Ghidorah was created by humankind rather than being an alien, having first appeared as a trio of pint-sized monsters called Dorads, that were later mutated through time travel and radiation exposure. Following tradition, this version of Ghidorah was a tool of a sinister group. In this case, a organization of humans from the future, who sought out to maintain economic balance by destroying any country that grew too prosperous. After Ghidorah was defeated by Godzilla in an epic battle, King Ghidorah's body was rebuilt as a cyborg known as Mecha King Ghidorah. Although this iteration was short-lived, its cybernetic components would later be repurposed as this era's version of Mecha Godzilla. Later in the 90s, Ghidorah appeared as the primary villain in the third film, the Rebirth of Mothra trilogy, which entirely eschewed his new origin and re-established him as an ancient space monster. In this iteration, King Ghidorah first arrived on Earth 135 million years ago, with the intention of wiping out the dinosaurs. Well, I gotta say, considering I'm wearing a dinosaur hat here, I'm not a big fan of that one, Ghidorah. However, through some time-traveling shenanigans, Mothra's descendant, Mothra Leo, goes back in time and battles Ghidorah, before he can lay waste to Japan. Unfortunately, during the fight, one of King Ghidorah's tails is severed, and subsequently buries itself underground, while Mothra Leo defeats Ghidorah by dropping him into a volcano. But this is where we learn about Ghidorah's newest ability. Just like his Hydra inspiration, Ghidorah is able to regenerate himself from severed limbs, with the tail that buried itself underground able to regenerate a whole new Ghidorah. In the Millennium era of Godzilla films, Ghidorah only made 2 appearances, although he remained a fixture of the Godzilla franchise, always appearing as Godzilla's rival, but not exactly a villain. In 2002, Ghidorah made his heroic debut in Godzilla, Mothra, and King Ghidorah Giant Monsters All-Out Attack, as one of the 3 mystical guardians alongside Mothra and Baragon, who are in charge of defending Japan from disaster. In this version, however, he actually sports 2 forms, and achieves his second and more powerful form through Mothra's sacrifice. In 2004, Godzilla Final Wars, we were introduced to a new monster known as Monster X, and during the final battle of the film, transforms into a new iteration of the 3-headed dragon known as Kaiser Ghidorah. This version has 4 legs and sports a black and gold design, although he doesn't survive very long. In the Netflix trilogy of anime films, a particularly shiny version of Ghidorah was depicted as a being of pure energy that can use its gravitational powers to feed off entire planets. This version is even worshipped as a deity by the alien XF, furthering Ghidorah's tendencies of working with sinister alien races. Now, finally, we have arrived at the Monsterverse, with King Ghidorah making his American film debut in Godzilla King of the Monsters. In this iteration, King Ghidorah appears as an ancient alien titan that re-emerged after being buried in Antarctica for a millennia. Once he's freed, everywhere he flies, he brings with him a hurricane, specifically a Category 6 one, although such a thing doesn't technically exist. Also, unlike the Japanese films, each one of Ghidorah's 3 heads has a different personality, and they're constantly throughout the movie butting heads with each other, pun intended. In an interesting inversion in Ghidorah's real-world origins, Yamata no Orochi, the key inspiration for Ghidorah, is hinted at being a real separate monster in this film. Thus, it's not out of the realm of possibilities that a future confrontation with his original inspiration could happen. After Ghidorah grows back his other 2 heads, of course. Godzilla has faced off against some incredible adversaries over the years, from giant apes to robot doppelgangers and a whole list of other things in between. But without a doubt, King Ghidorah is the big guy's most enduring and iconic foe. He has taken several forms throughout the years, but you can always bet that he'll be big, golden, 3-headed, and always be ready for a fight. So that is the history of King Ghidorah as well as his origin, the 3-headed dragon that gave me nightmares. Now, as difficult as this project has been, I honestly am very excited about it because, well, King Ghidorah is probably one of my favorite foes of Godzilla because, well, he's a giant 3-headed space dragon. I mean, realistically, what's not cool about that, right? I mean, how can you not like Ghidorah? just on that statement alone. Now, be sure to tune in next week where I'll be continuing this project on King Ghidorah, and we'll be doing a deeper dive on the Titan version itself, which is, well, happens to be the one that I'm making here. And that's assuming that I'll be able to maintain some kind of normal schedule with this massive Kaiju Titan-sized project. Now, the good news is, about part 1 here in particular, is I think the hardest part is now over. Making 3 identical skulls, or nearly identical skulls, was extremely difficult, especially doing it all by hand. However, there is still those massive wings in the back there, and yeah, that's going to be a nightmare on its own, but I'm not going to think about those right now. So, if you enjoyed this project and don't want to miss any of the videos, now would definitely be a good time to have your post notifications turned on, or if you're new here, perhaps subscribe, and well, just do the exact same thing, turn on that bell. Because I have a little saying here, because when a bell rings, a dragon gets his wings. Oh god, I'm thinking about wings again. At any rate, I'll also be doing some frequent updates with my YouTube shorts as well on this project. And if by chance you can't get enough of this type of content, be sure to go check out the links in the post description below where you will find other videos with my most recent animation, which I'll be doing a little bit more of a briefing on here very shortly, as well as, well, various other videos on my claymation, well, character projects. So enjoy! And one thing I should probably also mention that I generally don't is that I actually do have a Facebook and Instagram page for, well, Moose Motion as well, so if you'd like to support this content and my projects even further, be sure to go check those out. Now, a few things I would like to go over that have been popping up in the comment section lately. Now, a lot of you have been saying, I thought Godzilla -1 was big, and well, yeah, he is pretty big. He is 11 inches tall. Now, King Ghidorah here is obviously quite a bit bigger. So his dimensions are, he is approximately 16.5 inches tall, not standing completely vertically, and his wingspan reaches about 25.5 inches. So this is by far the largest armature doll that I have ever attempted to make, and I'm a little nervous, but I'm pretty confident I can pull it off, and he seems fairly well balanced considering, well, he is extremely top heavy and how big he is. So I'll be going over a little bit different build rundown than usual because I've noticed there's been other comments, well, asking about the types of materials that I use, so instead of doing little poetries and rhymes that I usually like to do during the build rundown, I'll be going over, well, a little bit more of a technical briefing to explain what has been going on during this project. At the beginning, I was using 2mm thick aluminum sculpting wire, and then doubling it up on itself to essentially make it a lot stronger. Then using as much tinfoil as possible to help save on clay and, well, keep that upper body especially as light as possible so that way he doesn't fall flat on, well, all 3 faces. Then I was using Sculpey oven-baked clay, and yes, that is important. Sculpey is one of the more expensive brands, and I should probably mention I'm obviously not paid to say this, but it, well, definitely pays to get the more expensive stuff. Experimenting with various different clays throughout the years, especially oven-baked stuff. The cheap stuff is just really frustrating, and you're not going to be happy with your, well, end result working with it, in my opinion. So just get the better stuff, it's worth it in the end. Basically, the cheap stuff tends to crack a lot more. Sculpey doesn't really do that necessarily. Now, the only downside is it does burn. Now, you just have to be careful with your timing, but unfortunately, I hit the save button probably a few too many times on those skulls. But those will be painted anyway, and I also use a little bit of plasticine clay to help them stand up, you could say. Hello everyone, and thanks for sticking around to the very end of the video, and thanks for tuning into Moose Motion. Now, normally things do end at the build rundown, but there's obviously a bit of an extension going on here, and I just didn't have time for it to squeeze it into the video any other way, so I'm just gonna do it this way. Now, up first and foremost, thank you all very much for, well, the latest success on that, well, last animation or video that I did. That has by far been the most popular video that I've done on YouTube, and I can't thank you all enough for the support, so I just wanted to do a quick thank you all because honestly, that means a lot to me that that video has gotten close to like 50,000 views, I believe, at this point. So, again, thank you. I will continue to work very hard and bring you more, well, monster fights and dinosaur fights in the near future. Now, last but not least, there has been a lot of requests coming in lately, to say the very least. So, to kind of orchestrate a system on how to prioritize, well, what content's going to be coming first, essentially, I'm orchestrating a bit of a point system, and I mentioned that to a few of you in the comments that I would be basically introducing that in this video. So the idea here is essentially you're going to leave a comment for whatever you would like to see next, be it your favorite monster, your favorite dinosaur, or animation idea, or something like that. And I have been keeping track of everything so far, so essentially, every time you make a mention for what you would like to see in, well, Moose Motion here, I will add a point towards it, and basically towards the end of each project, I will probably tally up the scores, and that will depend on what the next video is going to be. Now, I should also briefly probably mention the next 3 projects I do have already kind of set in stone because, well, they're really old and they do have quite a bit of points technically derived towards them already. So just out of respect for those, I already do have a few things lined up. So if you're out there trying to make sure that your monster or your dinosaur is next, and it's not necessarily going to happen right away here, don't be disappointed just because, yeah, there is a lot, and unfortunately it does take a lot more time to obviously make these things than it does to type down a few words, and I hope you can understand that. At any rate, I want to thank you all again for your support. I think that's going to wrap up this video for now, so that's enough from me. Till next time, take it easy, because, well, I got a big 3-headed dragon to work on over here, so better get back to work. Hello everyone on this kaiju-sized project. Today we'll be finishing off the skeleton, I do say, as well as covering it in plasticine clay and learning some fun facts about King Ghidorah along the way. So to start this video off today, we'll be finishing off a few details on the skeleton today. So some tail clubs and claws will be heading your way. And then once those are done, it's on to some painting fun. And then once all the dry brushing and clear coating is out of the way, it's on to the plasticine clay. Now it's on to the topic of the day, which King Ghidorah is the strongest to this day. The 3-headed dragon has long been a favorite of both mine and Toho's, only sharing the spotlight with the other big 3, Godzilla, Mothra, and Rodan. After first arriving on Earth during the Showa era in Ghidorah the 3-headed monster, it has continued to torment Earth and its collection of giant monsters for decades. The evil space dragon would return every era, stating its dominance and standing as one of Godzilla's deadliest foes. So today we're going to talk about my list of the most powerful versions of Ghidorah on film. There are 8 iterations of Ghidorah, 9 if you count its relative Des Ghidorah, and yes, I will be including that one. So let's take a look at the rank of the 9 most powerful versions of the 3-headed King Ghidorah. Now, before we begin, this is just my opinion. There's no definitive list of the most powerful King Ghidorah either by Toho or Legendary. That said, I hope this list is close to yours, and if it isn't, let me know down in the comments below. And as always, if you appreciate all the hard work that goes into this content and the sculptures that I make, be sure to hit that like button. Anyway, let's start this list of the most powerful King Ghidorahs. The first one on this list may surprise you, or at least some of you, and to be honest, it kinda surprised me. Let's start with number 9 with King Ghidorah from GMK. Godzilla, Mothra, King Ghidorah, Giant Monsters, All Attack. GMK is one of my favorites in Godzilla's classic series, and I love the role reversal of Godzilla and King Ghidorah switching places. Unfortunately, this take of the 3-headed dragon was one of the few that was actually smaller than the Godzilla it would face. This version of the 3-headed G would be tied for the shortest of the species, standing in at 50 meters tall, along with the second smallest wingspan and the lightest weight of all of them. Size would hold this iteration back, and on top of that, the GMK Ghidorah was also light on regen powers and durability, making it stronger than most kaijus, but yet still lacking compared to most of its counterparts. Flying in at number 8 is another one of the OG King Ghidorahs, the Showa era. To be honest, I had a hard time putting the Showa era king this low on the list, because this was one version of the 3-headed monster that could not be taken down alone. Unlike the Ghidorah of GMK, this dragon kaiju would be the largest of its era, standing at double the height of Godzilla at 100 meters tall. The only reason why the Showa era version isn't higher up on the list is more due to the height and weight than its sheer power and intelligence. In fact, I would say the Showa era Ghidorah ranks above the created ones of the Heisei era, if it wasn't for their immense size advantage. And speaking of that Heisei King Ghidorah, I've got Mecha King Ghidorah stepping into that number 7 spot. And right off the bat, I know many of you may disagree with this, because I'm listing the Mecha King before the standard Heisei Ghidorah. And that's not a mistake, and to be honest, I was never a huge fan of its origin story. The Dorads are a bit goofy to be the starter of the Destroyer of Worlds, but in retrospect, it does make sense how they came to be, and I must admit they are absolutely adorable. See part 1 for more on that one and various other Ghidorah backstories. This version would be one of the tallest so far, standing in at 150 meters, setting the standard for many future Dragon Kaiju relatives. So why am I putting the mecha version lower on the scale? Well, personally, to me it was the inferior monster. The armor upgrades weren't enough to stand against the atomic breath of Godzilla for the added weight. I would also say, in my opinion, the replacement head's weapon wouldn't be as strong as the natural gravity beams from the other two heads. Not to mention, if like the other versions of Ghidorah, the center head may be the leader or the dominant head, so losing it could hold the beast back. Now heading into number 6, which is of course the Heisei era King Ghidorah. I won't go into too much detail here, because realistically this is just Mecha King Ghidorah before Godzilla almost killed him. I'll leave it at this. I'll take a King Ghidorah with all of its heads, and a lighter weight over a piloted Mecha Ghidorah any day. Jumping into number 5, we get finally a spot for the outsider on our list, Death Ghidorah, or Des Ghidorah, a relative of Grand King Ghidorah from the Rebirth of Mothra series. Death Ghidorah would introduce us to the quad stance 3Gs, that would later pop up with Kaiser. Now, Des Ghidorah is only 50 meters tall, but the Kaiju is almost 100 meters long, all the while having a smaller wingspan, yet packing the weight, coming in at slightly lighter than the much taller Heisei King Ghidorah. On top of its hefty four-legged stance, Des Ghidorah was an offensive powerhouse, having abilities the earlier versions lacked. Death G had a variety of thermal beam attacks, an electric surge bite, and could create a shield for defense, and can even create fissures in the earth, releasing molten rock that the Kaiju could control and manipulate. To me, Death Ghidorah is a big step above the lower Ghidorahs on the list, and from here on out, the power levels rise significantly. At number 4 is none other than the more modern type King Ghidorah, or more commonly known as Grand King Ghidorah. Size-wise, this is another anomaly on the list, as the Grand King Ghidorah only stands at 60 meters tall, with a teeny 80-meter wingspan, and yet carries a respectable 50 metric tons of weight. I originally had Grand King G a little lower on this list because of the size difference, but Toho has stated that Grand King Ghidorah is more powerful than his relative Des Ghidorah. So it must be the offensive and defensive capabilities of this kaiju that make it score so high on the list. Like all versions of King Ghidorah, this one is capable of emitting gravity beams. Unlike other versions, Grand was able to use teleportation and hypnosis on humans, and could even create a dome to hold his human prey. The regeneration capabilities of this Ghidorah were on overdrive, allowing it to grow back from a small piece of a tail. And it was ultra durable, with only the armored type Mothra being able to damage it. An armored Mothra has been speculated by fans to be the most powerful kaiju in the Toho universe. Making its debut at number 3 on the list is the newcomer on the block, the Monsterverse King Ghidorah, my personal favorite. Standing tall as the largest physical Ghidorah in the entire species, this titan is huge. Coming in at 158.8 meters tall, this titan is the closest thing to Godzilla Earth. It weighed a massive 127,963.8 metric tons. In reference and homage to both the Showa and Heisei eras, this interpretation of the 3G would not only take Godzilla and Mothra to defeat, but it would take 2 separate power-ups from Godzilla, the Burning Like Fire stage and the Mothra power-up, in order to do it. This beast was durable, showing immunity to the Oxygen Destroyer missile, and crazy regen, able to regenerate important body parts like its head, which I'm kinda looking forward to animating, but also not. And here we are at number 2, the most powerful Ghidorah in the live-action film universe, known as the Kaiser, using the four-legged stance similar to the Des Ghidorah. The Kaiser was said by Toho themselves to be the most powerful or strongest form of Ghidorah ever. The thing was massive, standing just a bit shorter than legendary, at 140 meters tall with 150 meters in length. That's as long as the Heisei Ghidorah is tall. Kaiser possessed anti-gravity beams like Grand did, but these actually lived up to the name, able to lift kaijus and toss them around like toys. The creature could siphon energy from Godzilla by biting him, and was capable of transforming, and started off as Monster X. It was also ultra durable, with Godzilla not being able to do any damage till the Kaiser power-up. At the top of the list, coming in from another dimension, is the God of the Void. And to be honest, we don't even know what the true size and capabilities are. And for that matter, could we even understand them? Now, hold that thought while I explain these wings. Now, there was a lot of off-camera work here, so I just figured I'd briefly explain things. Now, essentially, adding clay to these wings, caused them to be fairly heavy, so I basically had to add a lot of additional support. So basically, I just wrapped additional armature wire around the existing skeleton, and now we'll just cover things back up with plasticine clay. And right back to the God of the Void, also known as the anime King Ghidorah. Ghidorah has always been known as a kaiju capable of destroying planets. And well, the anime one is responsible for destroying thousands of planets. This multiverse traveler is capable of attacking other kaijus, while remaining intangible, meaning it can't be touched or interfered, let alone fought. Instead of gravity beams like all other versions possessed, this Ghidorah would take gravity to a whole new level, and would enter other dimensions through portals that were bending time and space to its will. An ability we see at play when it attacks the aerodrome, and the crew sees their death before it even happens, because the gravity of Ghidorah is bending space-time. It can both drain energy as well as discharge it from the same bite, or even simply just coming into contact with its body. The only reason Earth Godzilla was able to defeat it was Hyrule was able to kill Metbees, the guidance for Ghidorah. The interdimensional Ghidorah is listed to have a length of 20 kilometers, but I don't think it's a creature you can very easily measure. This kaiju, if you can even call it that, could have had way more body past the portal in which we could see it from. And on top of that, for all we know, this is just one shape or form this Ghidorah is able to assume. Anyway, that is the 9 species of Ghidorah rated from weakest to strongest. Now, no offense to anyone out there for making requests on monsters, but I think I'm going to politely ignore anyone that requests the God of the Void because, yeah, that just kind of sounds a little bit impossible for stop motion standards, unfortunately. Now, I don't think I even have enough plasticine for that project in the first place, but yeah, at least for the time being. But no. Anyway, it is time for the build rundown. Now, at the start of part 2 here, obviously we had to finish that skeleton off before we could add the plasticine clay, which really wasn't that much work. We basically just needed a little bit of tinfoil for the tail clubs, as well as some oven-baked clay for the claws. I also put in some anchor points in the back for possible future flying animations. We'll see how that works out. And there was about, well, 3 times the amount of painting as there normally would be, because, well, there's 3 heads to work on this time. Nothing too fancy there, apart from a bit of dry brushing, which is basically just removing a vast majority of the paint that you're going to be using onto a paper towel or cloth before, well, essentially applying it onto the surface that you're going to be painting. And the idea is it basically gets all the high spots for your sculpture, giving it a little bit more of a rough texture. And one could say there was an awful lot of sculpting today with plasticine clay. I probably used about 6 pounds today, but I made about, well, 8 for this sculpture, you could say. So there's a lot more sculpting along the way, so join me for part 3, I do say. Hello everyone, so during this YouTube video today, I'm very happy to say we'll be finishing off King Ghidorah today. Long live the king. To start off this video today, we'll be adding plasticine muscles, I do say. Along with some wing experimentation, you could say. But I'm sad to say it didn't work according to plan, one could say. But that's okay, I had a plan B anyway. For more than one thing, you could say, because we also had to do some dragon surgery during this video today. Then once the wings are done, it's on to the final details, which is always fun. Now, I do say, if you appreciate all the hard work that has gone into this video today, be sure to hit that like button as hard as a kaiju, I do say. Because this has been the hardest project I have ever worked on to this day. And it took about 5 weeks to make, you could say. But as I sculpt away, we'll be learning about this species King Ghidorah today. It's said he came from another place, the sky possibly, or the stars. He was the youngest son and would not inherit territory, so he came to Earth to find his own long ago. That quote is from Godzilla King of the Monsters novelization, describing Ghidorah or Monster Zero. This information has been around for years, but has hardly been spoken about in the community of Monsterverse fans. The Ghidorah that overwhelmed planet Earth, mankind, and Godzilla was an outcast who was weaker, smaller, and younger than the other members of his royal family. Hard to believe after seeing the monster tear Earth's atmosphere and Godzilla to shreds. The devil with 3 heads left his home in search of a place where he could feel powerful and like a true king. So he came to Earth. His low rank in his family hierarchy tore at the dragon's pride and ego. And conquering Earth is how he could finally feel true domination. The same feeling his other family members had. During this video, we're going to theorize what Ghidorah's family was actually like, and why he felt he had to run away from home in order to get what he wanted: power. And if you're new here and enjoy this type of content, be sure to subscribe and like the video. And if you're already a subscriber, I just want you to know I highly appreciate your support. So before I get into this theory, I am just expanding upon the known lore for Ghidorah. with what we think could be the truth in this fantasy world. So bear in mind, this is just ideas and theories, so with that said, let's get into it. Ghidorah was the weaker and younger son in his family royal line. Similar to real-world royalty, the Ghidorah species must have had a culture and society that allows certain members of the species to claim the crown for their own and rule the territory till the day they die. Simply due to his age and his siblings who were born before him, he would never rule. This implies Ghidorah has parents, or at least one parent, that is still likely the true King Ghidorah in this Monsterverse lore. After that one supreme ruler had as many siblings that were needed to fill the dragon's territory, 4 of the Dragon Empire were born before the Ghidorah that we know came into existence. For the sake of envisioning this theory, picture a King Ghidorah ruling a planet that's harsh and extreme. Volcanoes cover the entirety of the surface and a reddish glow hue covers the entire land. In one of the old Toho lore lines, Ghidorah actually came from the planet Venus. So for the sake of continuity, let's imagine Ghidorah's home planet is Venus-like in representation in the Monsterverse. There, the King Ghidorah reigned supreme, but they weren't done expanding there. Our own solar system has 8 planets, and while we can never know what this fictional system that the Ghidorahs came from has within it, let's just say there are 8 planets there as well, each one of them having one of Ghidorah's siblings ruling the lands. There could even be more of his family members before him who also have no territory of their own, or coming their way, but are at the top of the line when one of the ruling siblings perishes. The lore stated that he will never have a chance to gain territory. So for all we know, Ghidorah could be the 15th infant or even lower down the family hierarchy. 4 creatures that appear to never die for multiple reasons. The only way Ghidorah could gain territory of his own was if he was able to kill one of his family members and take the land for his own. Being much younger, however, the likelihood of Ghidorah being able to overthrow one of his elder siblings or parents seems highly unlikely. That would be a battle the monster simply couldn't win. So his only option was to leave his kind solar system and find a new place where he could finally be in control and be the dominant one. So, quick briefing here on the failed experiment. Unfortunately, this polymer clay is not flexible enough, you could say, for the wings that I plan on making. So, it's on to plan B, which will be some plasticine wings. Now, back to the Ghidorahs. Ghidorah in this theory is like the egocentric, spoiled son in the line of wealthy and powerful parents. And while his life was probably just fine, he couldn't be happy with not being in the spotlight all the time. He wanted others to bow to him and flatter his ego. But to his family members and species, well, they all saw him as an outcast. And from there, you know what happened to Ghidorah. He decided to travel through space, either hitching a ride on an asteroid, or using some sort of physics-breaking powers to open up a wormhole to shoot him somewhere in the galaxy. There's also the chance that he flew all the way through space, as it is implied that Ghidorah doesn't breathe oxygen as we know it. But this seems really ridiculous even in a YouTuber's fantasy world. That just seems to be way too long of a distance. I'm sorry, Your Majesty. Ghidorah made it to Earth eventually, though, raging war with Godzilla and the other titans. Then was frozen in his icy tomb for eons and was awoken to be killed by Godzilla. Ghidorah's consciousness survived within his physical skulls that remained, and his spirit was flushed into Mechagodzilla. When the power from the Hollow Earth amplified this telepathic connection, Ghidorah himself came back to life in a way, gaining just enough of his past self to understand and continue his plan for domination. Luckily for everyone, the mechanical beast had a big weakness. Well, cheap liquor apparently. In Mechagodzilla, Ghidorah was once again put to death. But who's to say before he passed, the mechanized monster didn't use technology like satellites to control his body in the first place, didn't send a message out into the vastness of space, traveling for an undetermined amount of time and an unfathomable amount of distance. Possibly all the way back to Ghidorah's solar system. A hard-to-believe idea, but not impossible in this universe, I think. But could his siblings or even King Ghidorah hear this call for help? Before we get into this, let's open our thoughts and minds, and try to describe the rest of Ghidorah's family and what they could have possibly looked like. The variations of this creature could be vast. Something like what the Monsterverse hints at with Godzilla. Ghidorah's iconic 3-headed design could be just unique to him. It is possible that members of his kind have even more heads, or possibly less. Ghidorah towers over Godzilla, but could be half the size of some of his older, more developed counterparts. And I'm sure there are some that are smaller as well. I honestly like the idea of them having or retaining the iconic dragon-like appearance and having some sort of wings. However, some could have arms and wings, and not the classic armless wing approach that we've seen on all variations of Ghidorah over the decades. Some could be four-legged and powerful, and some others could have a snake-like body. If you think Ghidorah as a representation for a dragon, then all forms of dragons found all over the world in human cultures could be represented within the variations members of this monster's family and species. Perhaps just like fantasy dragons, Ghidorah's families were very diverse, not just in their appearance, but their personalities and morals. Ghidorah is a classic villain dragon template, who is hell-bent on conquering new lands for his own. But maybe he had some siblings who were honorable and lived by a strict moral code. Perhaps some were loners and just wanted to be left alone in their lairs. And maybe some did their best to keep peace between their worlds. Just because Ghidorah was an evil monster in the movie doesn't mean the rest of his kind would be the same way. A solar system ruled by gigantic, mighty dragons. The premise sounds pretty cool to me. Now that we have an idea of the Ghidorah species, would any of them come to check on Ghidorah if they received a strange distress signal from their long-lost relative? There is a slight chance another salty species member of his own world would one day grow tired of never getting territory just like him, and set out like he did and possibly stumbling down the same route as Ghidorah and finding Earth. Unless the signal somehow gave Earth's exact location. But until we know how Monster Zero found Earth, the likelihood of another member of his species actually finding the planet is very unlikely. Or, in the Monsterverse, Ghidorah actually does come from Venus, which would imply that he's gonna get to Earth pretty quick. We already know the royal Ghidorah family left in charge would have no interest in leaving their own territory, in hopes of finding their own sibling who long ago betrayed them for his own gain. That is, of course, if the planet that the species ruled were still in a position that could support these monsters. It would take something pretty drastic to happen in order for one of these monsters to leave their solar systems, I think. King Supreme Ghidorah and any of his offsprings wouldn't waste their time searching the galaxy, unless the place they called home had been destroyed. That being said, if Big Daddy G came to Earth possibly looking to utilize the insane power of the Hollow Earth, it would take all the titans of the Earth to stop it. And well, that kinda sounds familiar. Just like any good alien invasion, you can always stop the first wave, but it's only a matter of time before the next one shows up and it's back again for revenge. But could this work even in the future of the Monsterverse? With new shows and movies in development, the Monsterverse is growing nicely, and almost any idea could be brought to life in this fictitious universe. Personally, I think a graphic novel of the King Ghidorah world would be a great idea for the Monsterverse to expand upon the lore. I could see it working out well for fans, and it would definitely be a good read, because, well, I definitely would read it. And that concludes our deep dive on the King Ghidorah species. I hope you have learned something new during this video, and if you have any other interesting facts about King Ghidorah species, or King Ghidorah, or dragons in general, let me know in the comments below. And seeing how we're on the topic of fun facts, I figured I would share some stats on this claymation King Ghidorah. Now, up first and foremost, this has been by far the most complicated and hardest project I've ever worked on in this channel's history. Or, I mean, to be more wide, probably in general, my entire sculpting history. So, I've been sculpting a lot longer than I've been on YouTube, obviously, so it was difficult. But I'm very happy that it's all over, and it was definitely worth the 5 weeks that it took. He is 16 inches tall with a 25.5 inch wingspan, weighing approximately 11 pounds, each wing weighing 1 pound. It's definitely going to be a fine balancing act to do some animations with this massive stop motion character. However, I am definitely up for that task. Now, the real question is, how much XP did I gain from this project? Now we're going to talk about some projects that will be coming soon here to Moose Motion, so you have more to look forward to, well, coming in the near future here. So first, the request leaderboard. Up first and foremost, we have Gasosaurus leading, and then we have, well, Monsterverse Godzilla, as well as King Kong. Now, just to quickly fill in some people that might be unaware or new here, there's essentially a point system, so if you have something you would like to see be made here at Moose Motion, and then turned into a stop-motion cartoon, essentially just leave a comment below what you would like to see made, and I will add it to my list. And essentially, if a character or dinosaur in particular gets a lot of requests, it gets more points added towards it, and will be, well, probably made in, well, more urgency in comparison to some of the other projects, because obviously the audience wants to see that more. So, this is essentially a way for me to direct what kind of content I would be making for the audience that's a lot more active for this platform. Now, obviously, we're going to take a short break from request here because I would like to do a Kaiju Christmas special, so there will be an animation preparation video coming your way very soon. So if you have any ideas for a Kaiju Christmas special, let me know in the comments below, and perhaps I will add it into the animation if I have time. I have a bit of a tradition here and setting up my studio, well, for the following season that's coming up here, and it would be kind of fun to involve my community a little bit more with this tradition. So let me know what your ideas are in the comments. And the characters I would like to involve during this animation project would be Godzilla -1, obviously King Ghidorah here. If I can find 3 little Santa hats, that would be perfect, as well as Gojira. So let me know what your ideas are and let's brainstorm together. And if you're new here, now would be a good time to subscribe because there's a lot more creative ideas coming your way, I'm happy to say. So we're obviously at the point of the video where I'm touching up the final details here, and I can't express enough how difficult it was to try and make nearly 3 identical faces. That took a lot of time. Not to mention the giant wings. Another one of my arch nemesis is apart from spikes. I also hate spikes now too. God, these kaijus. Yeah, they give me a lot of weird, irrational fears. So, if you appreciate all the hard work and effort that goes into these massive claymation projects, I definitely would appreciate it if you hit that thumbs up as hard as you possibly can, because this project literally gave me nightmares. At the beginning, I woke up in the middle of the night, thinking about 3-headed dragons, so this one was definitely intense. And be sure you have your post notifications turned on so you don't miss any of the new short updates or any of my new videos coming out soon. And if you really enjoy this type of content and would like to see more, be sure to check out the post description in this video after you're done watching, so you will find other links to videos as well as my social media pages. Anyway, I just had to finish attaching the head here, and I will leave you to the glamour shots. So I hope you enjoyed the video, and take care till next time. Hey, thanks for sticking around to the very end of the video. Be sure to leave a like if you enjoyed the content, comment below what you think, share with your friends, and perhaps consider subscribing if you're new. Anyway, that's enough from me. Till next time, take it easy. And quick shout out to Cretaceous Kook ×2 for spotting Milton the Moose.